After being left with absolutely nothing in the divorce, and with no money for rent, I had no choice but to find a dirt-cheap room in a house with a dark history. The landlady told me it was bad luck, which was why she was only charging $300 a month. Who could have guessed that a sudden power outage that very night would lead me to knock over a potted plant in the dark? When I saw what was inside, I was stunned. It was a terrifying secret. The moment the power went out, the entire world sank into darkness with a sharp pop. Lauren Fox, 34 years old. Clenching the $237.50 I had left to my name, I froze like a statue in the unfamiliar, pitch-black rental room. Damn it! The breaker tripped again. The landlady's voice drifted up from the floor below, carrying a strange, guilty urgency. Hold on, Lauren. I'll go check the fuse box right now. Her footsteps hurried away, making the darkness in my room feel even more terrifyingly silent. I held my breath. My eyes hadn't adjusted yet, and I couldn't see a thing. I could only smell the musty scent of a house that had been closed up for years, mixed with a faint, unidentifiable foul odor that cheap Glade plug-ins couldn't mask. This place was $300 a month. In a major metropolitan city where rent was astronomical, it was so cheap it felt like a joke, but it wasn't a joke. Earlier that day, the landlady, a woman named Mrs. Higgins with a tight perm and shifty eyes, had rubbed her hands together and told me, "Look, honey, I'll be straight with you. Something happened in this room. It's got bad juju. The last tenant didn't even last a week before he packed up. If you're not the superstitious type, it's $300, first month and deposit up front. Utilities are your problem." She blurted out the price rapidly, as if afraid I'd change my mind. The furniture is old, but it works. I had looked at the outdated particle board dresser, the chipped wooden table, and the half-dead, cracked dirt houseplants on the small balcony, and nodded. I didn't have a choice. 3 days ago, I was living in a luxury condo in the city's upscale east side, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the skyline. That was until Richard, my husband of 8 years, slapped a divorce settlement on the table in front of me. Standing next to him was my former best friend, Sarah. Her stomach was slightly rounded, and she rested her hand gently on it, looking at me with a sickening look of pity. "Lauren, the spark is gone. There's no point in forcing it," Richard had said, coldly flicking his cigarette. "You haven't worked in years. The household relied on my income. This settlement is more than fair." Sarah's voice was soft, but her words were laced with venom. "It's fair, Lauren." Fair? I had flipped through the documents with trembling hands, my vision going dark. "Our joint savings? Wiped out by bad crypto investments," he claimed. The condo was a premarital asset protected by an ironclad prenup. His luxury car belonged to his firm. I was being kicked to the curb with nothing, and his high-priced lawyers made it clear I should be grateful he wasn't saddling me with imaginary debt. I had screamed and cried like a lunatic. Richard just watched me with icy detachment. "Look at yourself, Lauren. What man could stand you like this? Sign the papers and keep a little dignity. Otherwise, I'll see you in court, and you'll leave looking much worse." Dignity. I gritted my teeth, signed the papers, and was escorted out of the home I had meticulously cared for over 8 years, carrying nothing but a suitcase with a few changes of clothes. My phone went silent. Our mutual friends had either known all along or decided I was a lost cause. My parents had passed away years ago, and I was estranged from my brother. For 3 days, I stayed in the cheapest motel I could find on the edge of the city. I applied for a dozen jobs, only to be rejected for being too old for entry-level or lacking recent experience. My money slipped through my fingers like water. So, when I saw the crumpled, handwritten for-rent flyer stapled to a telephone pole in this gritty neighborhood, even with the tiny words, "Tenant died recently," brave souls only scribbled at the bottom, I called the number like a drowning woman grabbing a lifeline. Could a haunted house really be more vicious than the living? The darkness was thick as ink. Relying on my memory from the daytime, I carefully shuffled toward the corner, trying to find my suitcase. Inside was a small candle I had swiped from the motel. My toe kicked something. Plastic rolled across the floor. It was the knee-high, broken plastic planter by the balcony door. I had noticed it earlier. The plant inside looked like a dead money tree, its yellow leaves drooping. The side of the pot had a large crack, haphazardly taped together with clear packing tape. Panic flared in my chest. I moved too quickly, and my knee smashed into it. Crash. A heavy, dull sound of shattering plastic and packed dirt exploded in the dead silence. Damp soil and broken plastic shards splattered against my bare calves. Great, I thought. My $300 hasn't even settled in her pocket, and I've already broken the landlady's property. I frantically crouched down, hands blindly sweeping across the floor, trying to see if I could salvage the plant. My fingers brushed against sharp plastic, wet potting soil, and something else. A stack of hard, rectangular bricks. My heart skipped a beat. Trembling, I grabbed one of the mud-caked blocks. I felt a familiar texture and the distinct raised print of paper. No. It couldn't be. "Hey, Lauren, power's back!" Mrs. Higgins' shrill voice echoed up the stairwell. A loud click followed, and the dim, yellow incandescent bulb above my head flickered violently before struggling to life. The sudden light made me squint. I instinctively looked down at my mud-covered hands. In the next second, I froze, utterly paralyzed, as if struck by lightning. What I was clutching in a death grip wasn't broken plastic or tree roots. It was a thick stack of $100 bills. They were filthy, smeared with wet potting soil, but they were undeniably real, and it wasn't just the stack in my hands. Where the bottom of the broken planter had spilled out, the dirt had parted to reveal more of those distinctive, greenish-blue edges. 1 stack, 2 stacks, 3. My breathing stopped. A buzzing sound filled my ears as blood rushed to my head. I violently twisted my neck toward the door. Mrs. Higgins' footsteps were coming up the stairs, getting louder. "Lauren? You okay up there?" I heard a loud crash. Her voice was just outside the door. Pure instinct took over. Like I had been electrocuted, I snatched an old winter coat I had tossed over a nearby chair and, with a speed I never knew I possessed, threw it over the mess on the floor, burying the scattered dirt and the terrifying secret beneath it. The doorknob turned. I stood frozen in place, my hands behind my back, still clutching the muddy bills. My palms were icy and wet, my back instantly drenched in cold sweat. Mrs. Higgins pushed the door open. Her eyes darted first to my pale, ghostly face, then shifted to the pile covered by the coat on the floor, noting the stray clumps of dirt and plastic shards around it. "Oh, Jesus! How did this pot break?" The color drained from her face, and her voice spiked an octave. That belonged to the last tenant. Why weren't you careful?" Her reaction was entirely wrong. That wasn't the look of a landlord upset about a cheap, cracked planter. There was a flash of raw panic in her eyes, like she was terrified I had discovered something. I forced down the dryness in my throat and squeezed out a voice. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Higgins. It was pitch black, and I couldn't see. How much is the pot? I'll pay for it." "Pay? Forget it. It's just a piece of junk." She waved her hand dismissively, but her eyes kept darting suspiciously between my face and the coat on the floor. She took a step forward, looking as if she wanted to lift the coat and check underneath. My heart leaped into my throat. Just as her hand reached toward the edge of the fabric, "Mrs. Higgins!" I raised my voice sharply. She jumped, pulling her hand back to look at me. I took a deep breath, trying to make my voice sound like nothing but frustration and fear. Is this place really haunted? Right when I broke the pot, I thought I saw a dark shadow dart across the room. Could it be the... I let my voice trail off into a trembling whisper. It worked. The color completely washed out of Mrs. Higgins' face. The investigative look in her eyes was instantly replaced by terror. She took a massive step back, putting distance between herself and the coat, her voice shaking. "What are you talking about? There's no shadow. You were just seeing things in the dark. The pot is broken." Just sweep it up tomorrow. She didn't dare linger. She didn't even want to look at the pile of debris anymore. She hastily muttered, "Get some sleep. Lock your door tight," and practically fled down the stairs, pulling the door shut behind her. Listening to her frantic footsteps fade away, my legs gave out. I nearly collapsed onto the cheap linoleum floor. A cold draft hit my sweat-soaked back, making me shiver. I stared intently at the old coat on the floor, then slowly opened my cramped hands. Several mud-stained, crumpled Benjamin Franklins lay quietly in my sweaty palms. This wasn't a dream. I lunged forward, threw the coat aside, and frantically dug through the damp soil with my bare hands. 1 stack, 2, 3, 5, 8. 8 bundles of $100 bills. They were hastily wrapped in saran wrap and buried at the bottom of the planter. Some of the plastic had torn, and the money had been corroded by the soil and plant roots, the edges slightly rotted, but the vast majority was perfectly intact. I slumped back onto the cold floor, staring at the small mountain of cash in front of me, inhaling the distinct smell of wet dirt mixed with the metallic, ink-heavy scent of American currency. My mind went completely blank. A rough estimate. There had to be 80, maybe $100,000 here. A terrifying thought slithered into my mind like a venomous snake. This haunted room. This absurdly low rent. Mrs. Higgins' suspicious panic. Where did this money come from? Why was it buried here? Did the previous tenant really move out just because of bad vibes? Or did he find something he wasn't supposed to? And Lauren Fox, a penniless, discarded housewife. What kind of monstrous secret had I just stumbled into by tripping over a plant in the dark? Outside, the night wind howled through the gaps in the old window frames. I sat there hugging my knees next to a pile of mysterious, illicit cash. I was freezing. Yet a dark, almost manic fire began to burn from the absolute rock-bottom ruins of my soul. Richard. Sarah. You said I had nothing. You said I was useless trash surviving on your charity. What if I had this money? Once the thought took root, I couldn't suppress it. I reached out, my trembling fingers brushing across the cold, filthy bills. A $300 a month murder room? This wasn't a curse. This was the opening hand to my comeback. I sat completely motionless for what felt like hours. It wasn't until my legs went entirely numb that I finally took a sharp breath, the cold air stinging my lungs. I pinched my thigh. The dull pain told me I was awake. The smell of dirt and money filled my nose. Money. So much money. In my 34 years, I had never seen this much physical cash piled up. When Richard's firm had a good year, the numbers in his bank account were higher, but those were just numbers on a screen, cold, distant. This was right in front of me. Filthy, silent, yet radiating an intoxicating power. My heart pounded like a drum against my eardrums. My first instinct was to call 911, but a second later, I ruthlessly crushed that idea. Call the cops and say what? That I rented a sketchy room, broke a pot, and found a cartel's stash? How would I explain to the police where it came from? Would Mrs. Higgins admit to knowing about it? She'd probably flip it on me, claiming I stole it from her. I was a divorced, broke woman from out of town with no job. Who would believe me? Worse. What if this was tied to a cartel or a gang murder? I shuddered. No. I absolutely could not involve the authorities. Should I bury it back? Pretend nothing happened? I looked at the shattered plastic, the rotting roots, and the mess of soil I had just torn apart. It was impossible to put back exactly as it was. Mrs. Higgins's reaction proved she was already suspicious. Even if I poorly patched it together, the moment she checked, she'd know. Cold sweat prickled my skin again. I stumbled to the door, locked the deadbolt, and pressed my ear against the wood. The house was dead silent. She must be in her own apartment downstairs, but the walls in this dump were paper thin. I can't leave it here. The thought was crystal clear. It was too exposed. Covering it with a coat was a temporary panic response. Mrs. Higgins would definitely find an excuse to come up tomorrow. My eyes darted frantically around the barren room. The cheap dresser, the flimsy mattress, the chipped table, none of it was safe. My suitcase was too small and too obvious. My gaze finally settled back on the broken planter. More accurately, near it. A wild, teeth-chattering idea formed in my head. Hide it. Right here in the room. But not just anywhere. I crouched down and inspected the cash. Mostly $100 bills, bound with standard bank straps, though the straps looked old. I carefully rubbed a bill. It was real. It wasn't sequentially numbered, brand new bank cash. This was street money. Dirty money. Who else buries their legal salary in a flower pot? I counted the bundles. 8. Assuming standard $10,000 straps, that was $80,000. 80 grand. To me, right now, it was an astronomical fortune. With this, I could leave this hellhole tonight, rent a decent apartment, take my time finding a good job, start a business, never look at anyone's condescending face again, never have to think about Richard and Sarah's sickening smugness. A surge of heat rushed up my chest, but I forced it down. No, I can't touch it. Not yet. This money was a ticking time bomb, until I knew its origin. Moving it permanently meant a death sentence. The immediate priority was making sure the landlady thought it had never been touched. I scanned the room again, the floorboards, the ceiling, and finally, the heavy wooden baseboard trim, running along the wall separating the bedroom from the balcony. It looked ancient, and the caulking where it met the drywall was crumbling. I held my breath, crept over, and pried at it with my fingernails. The wood was loose. The drywall behind it was deteriorating. A plan materialized. I dug through my suitcase and found a sturdy plastic box cutter I used for opening packages. I found a thick, waterproof Ziploc bag I had used to pack toiletries. Then, I knelt back by the pile of wealth, my heart threatening to explode, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip the bags. I forced myself to breathe. In, out. I carefully placed the mud-caked bundles into the Ziploc bag, moving as silently as possible. In the dead quiet of the room, the crinkling plastic sounded deafening. Every rustle made my scalp prickle, forcing me to stop and listen for footsteps. I squeezed the air out, sealed it tight. A heavy, dense package. Next, I moved to the baseboard. Using the dull box cutter, I began to painstakingly pry the wooden trim away from the wall. Chunks of dry, crumbly plaster fell out. I couldn't make too much noise, so progress was agonizingly slow. Sweat dripped down my forehead, stinging my eyes. I don't know how long it took, but I finally created a gap large enough. Behind the drywall was a hollow void between the studs, filled with decades of dust and cobwebs. Feeling like a thief, no, I was a thief. I shoved the $80,000 package deep into the dark void. I pushed the heavy wooden baseboard back into place, wedging some of the broken drywall chunks behind it to hold it steady, then swept some loose dirt from the planter over the floor gap to blend it in. It wasn't perfect, but in the dim light, it looked untouched. As for the original spot, I swept the broken plastic, dead roots, and damp soil into a pile, wrapped it all in my ruined coat, and shoved it behind a pile of junk boxes on the balcony. Tomorrow, I'd throw it in the dumpster. As for the depth of the soil missing from the pot, I couldn't fix that tonight. I just had to gamble that Mrs. Higgins didn't know exactly how deep it was buried, and that she was too terrified of the ghosts in this room to inspect it too closely. By the time I finished, the sky outside was turning a pale, bruised blue. Dawn was breaking. I sat slumped on the cold floor, staring at my handiwork, my heart still lodged in my throat. It was hidden, but was it safe? Whose money was this? Did the previous tenant know? Was that why he died? Countless questions and terrors tangled in my mind. But stronger than the fear was a cold, creeping excitement rising from the absolute bottom of my despair. This money was like a toxic flame dropped into the dry tinder of my ruined life. I knew it was dangerous. I knew it could burn me to ashes. But I had been freezing in the dark for so long. Even if I got burned, I was going to grab this light. I wiped my face with a muddy hand and walked over to the cracked bathroom mirror. The woman staring back at me was pale, her eyes sunken, hair a mess. But there was a faint, almost feral curve to her lips that I didn't recognize. Look at you, Lauren. You look like a desperate fugitive. But being a fugitive was better than being a dog begging for scraps. Outside, a distant siren wailed. A new day had begun. My new life built on dirty money and a lethal secret had begun. I didn't sleep a wink. My nerves were strung as tight as piano wire. Every tiny noise, a cough from downstairs, a car rolling down the street, even mice scurrying in the ceiling made me jolt upright, straining to listen. I only exhaled when I was sure it had nothing to do with my secret. When full daylight finally hit, the gritty neighborhood came alive. The roar of a garbage truck, neighbors yelling, a baby crying, the chaotic urban symphony actually helped relax my rigid muscles. At least it was daytime. My body ached. I used half a bottle of leftover Aquafina to wash the grime off my face. The cold water shocked me awake. Looking at my exhausted reflection, I slapped my cheeks hard. Don't crack, Lauren. If you crack now, you're truly dead. I changed clothes, shoved my dirty ones to the bottom of my suitcase, and meticulously cleaned the room, focusing on the balcony. I stuffed the coat full of dirt and plastic into a black, heavy-duty trash bag, tied it off, and left it by the door. I mopped the floor to erase any muddy footprints. As for the baseboard, I stared at it for a long time. The dust and dirt I'd sprinkled over it looked natural. Unless someone got on their hands and knees with a flashlight, they wouldn't notice. It was nearly 8 a.m. The smell of frying bacon and the clatter of pans drifted up from downstairs. My stomach growled violently. I'd eaten nothing but a cup noodles all day yesterday. Lauren! You awake? Mrs. Higgins' voice called out from the hallway, dripping with forced cheerfulness. My heart spiked. Coming! I'm up, Mrs. Higgins. I forced my voice to sound casual as I opened the door. Mrs. Higgins stood there holding a paper plate with a slice of banana bread and a paper cup of coffee. She smiled widely, but her eyes were already darting past me, scanning the room like a hawk, zeroing in on the balcony. How'd you sleep, honey? Didn't see any. Shadows, did you? She asked, dropping her voice, trying to gauge my reaction. I'm fine. Just first night jitters in a new place, I guess. Probably just spooked myself, I said, stepping aside to let her in, keeping my gaze open and naive. Mrs. Higgins, I am so sorry about that planter. I swept it all up. I'm taking the trash out soon. How much do I owe you? Oh, for a piece of plastic? Don't be silly. She waved it off, walking inside. Her eyes swept over the empty corner on the balcony where the pot used to be. She saw nothing but a damp spot on the concrete. She blinked, clearly thrown off. You swept it all up? Man, it must have shattered good. Let me just... She gestured toward the black trash bag by the door. You want me to take that down for you? No, that's okay, I said quickly, then instantly dialed it back, forcing a nervous laugh. I mean, it's full of gross dirt. I'll just toss it in the dumpster outside. Suit yourself, she chuckled nervously, her feet shuffling on the linoleum. She kept looking at the floor, as if trying to see if the dirt had been sifted through. My heart was in my throat, but I maintained a mask of calm ignorance. Thank you for the breakfast, Mrs. Higgins. By the way, where's the closest grocery store? I need to buy some basics. Just take a right out the front door, 2 blocks down. She replied absent-mindedly. Her gaze finally detached from the floor and locked onto my face, shifting into a calculating stare. So, Lauren, you living all alone? No family around to help out? She was probing, testing to see if I was a soft target, someone who could disappear without making noise. I swallowed hard, forcing tears into my eyes, lowering my head. Just me. I just went through a terrible divorce. I have nowhere to go, and I can't find a job. I know I'm a mess. Playing the pathetic broken victim was the best camouflage. Relief mixed with genuine contempt washed over her face. She patted my arm. Well, bless your heart. Women have it tough. You just rest up here. It ain't the Ritz, but it's cheap. You let me know if you need anything. But then her tone shifted, dropping to a harsh whisper. But hey, keep quiet about the history of this room, all right? Don't go running your mouth to the neighbors. It's bad for my business. Bad for you. Understand? I understand. I won't say a word. I nodded frantically. The picture of a timid, grateful mouse. After a few more pleasantries, she finally headed downstairs, though she threw one last, lingering look at the balcony before shutting the door. I leaned against the door, my legs turning to jelly. That 10-minute exchange felt like a war zone. She suspected something. She was looking for the cash, but she didn't have proof. And she didn't want to blow her cover by tearing the room apart openly. She was terrified of something, too, which confirmed it. That money was tied to blood. Did the last tenant die because he found it? I shook my head, forcing the panic down. The money was safe for now, but I couldn't keep it here. I needed a plan to move it, to launder it, or just to secure it. And to do that, I needed an ally. Someone entirely disconnected from this city, from Richard, and from this slum. I thought of a name I hadn't spoken in years. Vanessa. V. We were roommates in college. She was fiercely loyal, a tough-as-nails girl who took zero crap. After college, we drifted apart as I morphed into the perfect corporate wife for Richard. Last I saw on Instagram, she opened a dive bar on the industrial edge of the city. Would she help me? Would I be dragging her into a cartel hit? I had no choice. I pulled out my phone and scrolled until I found her number. I typed a text. V, it's Lauren. I'm in desperate trouble. Richard left me with nothing. I'm alone, and I stumbled into something highly dangerous. I need help. Can we meet? Please. It's life or death. I hit send and collapsed into a chair. 5 minutes later, my screen lit up. V. Location pin sent. Blue Island Roasters, 3 p.m. Who do I need to beat with a bat? I got you. Tears pricked my eyes. In this frozen, terrifying hellscape, that single text was the only warm thing I had left. Blue Island Roasters was a trendy spot in a gentrifying district, smelling of roasted beans and expensive pastries. I sat in a dark corner booth, wearing my faded sweater, clutching a glass of ice water, feeling entirely out of place among the MacBook typing hipsters. At 3:05 p.m., the door chimed. A tall, striking woman strode in. Asymmetrical dark hair, vintage leather jacket, ripped black jeans, and oversized aviators. V. She hadn't changed. If anything, her edge had sharpened. She scanned the room, spotted me, and frowned. She marched over, threw her shades on the table, and sat down. Lauren, she said, her eyes sweeping over my gaunt face and cheap clothes. You look like absolute hell. Her bluntness felt like a warm blanket. I looked down, coughing nervously. V snapped her fingers at a barista. Get her a hot latte and a massive slice of whatever cake has the most sugar. Put it on my tab. She leaned in, her voice low and fierce. Did Richard put his hands on you? Tell me everything. Word for word. The dam broke. All the terror, the betrayal, the divorce, the eviction, the $300 haunted room, the blackout, the broken pot, the cash it all poured out of me in a frantic, stuttering whisper. V didn't interrupt. She just sat there, bending a stir stick until it snapped, her face growing darker and darker. When I finally finished, gasping for air, she let out a long breath. That piece of shit, Richard. And Sarah? That two-faced bitch. I told you back in college he was a narcissist climbing the corporate ladder. But you wouldn't listen. V growled through her teeth. And now this. A slumlord, a dead tenant, and 80 grand in dirty cash. She chugged her iced coffee and locked eyes with me. You were right not to call the cops. The landlord is definitely involved. If the last guy died in there, you are sitting on a powder keg. I know, I whispered, near tears. I'm terrified. I don't know what to do. I can't leave it there, but I can't move it. V stayed silent for a moment, analyzing me. We're moving it, but not yet. And not directly. I run a bar down in the Rust District. The Rusty Anchor. I've got a secure storage room in the back. Just me and my bouncer. Mateo. Have the keys. He's solid. Here's the play. You go back today. Tomorrow morning. Mrs. Higgins will probably leave to run errands or hit the corner store. When she's gone, you pack that cash into something totally boring. A reusable grocery bag. Wrap it in old clothes. She slid a napkin across the table and jotted down an address. Take the 42 bus to this intersection. Text me when you're close. Mateo will pick you up in a silver Chevy Astro van. Act normal. If anyone asks, you're going to a job interview or begging a friend for a loan. V. This is insane. What if they follow me? What if I get you killed? Shut up, V snapped, though her eyes were soft. You fought off my creepy ex in the dorms, remember? I owe you. But Lauren, let me be crystal clear. Her voice dropped to a dangerous octave. This is dirty money. It brings blood. We hold it until we figure out who it belongs to, or until the heat dies down. If you get greedy and try to run off to Vegas with it, I will personally hunt you down. Are we clear? I swear, V. I just want to survive. Good. She patted my hand. Eat your cake. You're too skinny for a gang war. The next 24 hours were a waking nightmare. I returned to my room, acting like the depressed divorcee. I found a faded red Trader Joe's canvas tote bag in the closet, left by a previous tenant. It was perfect. At 8 a.m. the next morning, I heard Mrs. Higgins tell the neighbors she was walking to the bodega for cigarettes and lottery tickets. The front door slammed. I bolted to the baseboard, pried it open with bleeding fingernails, and dragged the heavy Ziploc bag out. I stuffed it into the Trader Joe's tote, wrapping an old, ugly sweater around it. I hugged it to my chest, checked the hallway, and slipped out. I power-walked to the bus stop, my heart hammering against my ribs, convinced every passing car was a Cartel hit squad. I got on the crowded bus, clutching the bag to my chest, keeping my head down. When I got off at the bleak, industrial intersection V had given me, a beat-up silver Astro van immediately pulled up. The passenger window rolled down, revealing a stocky, tattooed man. Lauren? They sent me. Get in. It was Mateo. I scrambled in. We drove through a maze of abandoned factories until we pulled behind an old brick building. The Rusty Anchor. V was waiting by the back door. She took one look at my pale face and the bulging tote bag. She led us into a windowless back office, moved a heavy filing cabinet, and pressed a hidden latch on the wall. A panel popped open, revealing a steel-lined wall safe. She opened the tote, pulled back the sweater, and saw the dirt-stained stacks of $100 bills. Her breath hitched slightly, but she quickly shoved the whole package into the safe and locked it. It's safe here, she said, turning to me. No one but me and Mateo know about this compartment. Now go upstairs, take a hot shower in my apartment, and I'll make you some food. Sitting in V's apartment, wearing her oversized sweatpants and eating a bowl of instant ramen she whipped up, the adrenaline crash hit me. I began to sob uncontrollably. V slid a cheap Android phone across the table. Burner phone. Only use this to call me. Your iPhone is probably tracked by Richard's corporate IT guys anyway. What do we do now? I asked, wiping my nose. I did some digging, V said, lighting a cigarette. I know some guys in the neighborhood. That apartment you're in? The guy who died there 2 years ago was Tyler Brooks. Police ruled it an overdose. Heart attack. But right before he died, his cousin, a heavy gambler, came to visit. They had a massive screaming match. Then the cousin vanished off the face of the earth. Tyler died a week later. I felt the blood drain from my face. And Mrs. Higgins? Mrs. Higgins has a son, Jimmy J. Bone Higgins. He's a collector and enforcer for a local loan shark outfit. Violent piece of work. Word on the street is he's currently in deep shit with his boss for skimming off the top. It all clicked. The money is Jimmy's. He buried his stolen stash in his mom's empty rental. Tyler found it, or his cousin did. They fought over it. And Jimmy killed Tyler to protect the secret. It's highly probable, V said grimly. And now Jimmy is desperate for that cash, and his mother knows you broke the pot. You have to go back. Go back! Are you insane? If you run now, they will know you took it. Jimmy will hunt you down. You have to go back and act completely clueless. Be the pathetic victim. Give us time to build a trap. She handed me a tiny black object. Hidden spy camera. Put it in the smoke detector in your room. Pointing at the door. If they come in while you're out, or if they threaten you, we want it on tape. I stared at the tiny lens. I had walked into a slaughterhouse. But looking at V's fierce eyes, I realized I had to fight my way out. 2 days later, the pressure was unbearable. Mrs. Higgins was watching me like a hawk. I spent my days walking the streets, faking job hunts. One afternoon, returning to the slums, my blood froze. Parked right outside my building was a gleaming black Range Rover. It looked absurd in this neighborhood. Richard and Sarah. They were standing by the car. Sarah, in a designer maternity dress, was holding Richard's arm. When they saw me, Sarah smiled that toxic, pitying smile. Lauren! Oh my God, we were just driving through. Is this really where you live now? Sarah cooed. Fury blinded me. But V's voice echoed in my head. Act. Play the victim. Richard. Sarah. I stammered, shrinking in on myself, looking terrified. What are you doing here? Seeing how the mighty have fallen. Richard sneered, looking disgusted at the trash on the street. You're living in a ghetto, Lauren. Have some self-respect. Sarah reached into her Prada bag and pulled out a stack of $20 bills. Here, sweetie. Go stay in a Motel 6. This place is dangerous. I didn't take it. Instead, I widened my eyes in genuine, frantic fear. I wasn't acting. No, don't be here. You need to leave. This house. It's not safe. The people here are dangerous. Go away. Just leave me alone. I screamed the last part, turning and sprinting into the building like a madwoman, ignoring Richard's annoyed shouts. I bolted to my room, locked the door, and collapsed. I looked up at the smoke detector. The camera had caught it all. My hysterical warning. The Range Rover. Their faces. But why were they here? Was it a coincidence? Or did Mrs. Higgins somehow contact my emergency contact from my rental application to see if I had funneled money to my ex? The next day, the real nightmare began. I was walking back from the bodega when a matte black Harley-Davidson roared up onto the sidewalk, blocking my path. The rider kicked the kickstand down. Shaved head, neck covered in gang tattoos, thick muscles straining against a black t-shirt. Jimmy Higgins. He didn't say a word. He just walked up, grabbed me by the collar of my cheap coat, and slammed me against the brick wall of the alley. The smell of stale beer, cigarettes, and raw aggression washed over me. My mom says you broke her flower pot. He hissed, his voice like gravel. I'm sorry, I gasped, tears instantly springing to my eyes. I'll pay for it. I don't give a fuck about the plastic, bitch. Jimmy growled, leaning his face inches from mine. Where is the stuff that was inside the dirt? If you touched one single cent, I will cut you into pieces and feed you to the stray dogs. Where is it? I cried hysterically. What stuff? I don't know. It was just dirt and a dead plant. I threw it in the dumpster. Please, I don't know what you're talking about. He stared into my eyes, searching for a lie. I was so petrified my bladder almost gave way, which made my terror perfectly authentic. He shoved me hard into the dirt. "You better be stupid, not lying." He spat. "Keep your mouth shut." He got back on his bike and peeled out, leaving me choking on exhaust. I crawled to my feet. He knew it was gone. He was desperate. I pulled out my burner phone and called V. "He's here, Jimmy. He threatened to kill me." V's voice was ice cold. "It's time. Operation Roadblock. Let's pit the wolves against the snakes." The plan was highly illegal, insanely dangerous, and our only way out. We were going to use Richard to trigger Jimmy and let the police sweep them all up. That evening, I sat on a bench in a park a mile away from the apartment. I put a new SIM card in the burner phone and dialed Richard's private number. He answered on the fourth ring. "Vance." I lowered my voice, putting on a rough, panicky accent. "Mr. Vance? I'm calling about your ex-wife, Lauren. She lives on 4th and Elm. She stole something from the local cartel. They are going to kill her tonight. She was crying and gave me your number. You better do something, or her blood is on your hands." I hung up immediately, snapped the SIM card, and threw it down a storm drain. Richard was a narcissist who hated bad PR. He wouldn't call the cops and risk his corporate reputation being tied to a ghetto cartel hit involving his ex-wife. He would bring his private security or come himself to shut it down quietly. Next, I put in a second SIM card and called the bodega downstairs from my apartment. Mrs. Higgins picked up. I disguised my voice again, speaking in a low, masculine growl. "Tell Jimmy his stash is gone. The bitch upstairs gave it to her rich ex-husband. He drives a black Range Rover. He's coming back tonight to get the rest of her stuff. Tell Jimmy if he wants his money, he better get there fast." I hung up, destroyed that SIM, and threw the phone in a trash can. Then, I ran. I ran through the dark streets until I reached the Rusty Anchor. Faye had her laptop open on the bar. She had taken the hidden camera footage of Richard and Sarah outside my building where I yelled about the house being unsafe and edited it to look like Richard was scoping the place out. Using a VPN and Tor browser, V sent an anonymous email to the local FBI field office, the DEA tip line, and the local action news station. Subject: high-level corruption and gang violence at 4th and Elm. Body: local loan shark Jimmy Higgins, wanted for the murder of Tyler Brooks, is moving cartel cash at his mother's property. Corporate executive Richard Vance, license plate included, is laundering the money. A violent transaction is happening tonight at this location. See attached video proof. We hit send. Then we locked the bar, went up to her apartment, turned out the lights, and waited. 45 minutes later, the police scanners V had running on her desk exploded with chatter. 10 to 31. Heavily armed suspects in the alley off 4th and Elm. Multiple vehicles. Black SUV surrounded by motorcycle club members. Shots fired. I repeat, shots fired. Send SWAT. We sat in the dark, clutching each other's hands. It worked. Jimmy, desperate and enraged, had ambushed Richard's Range Rover thinking Richard had his $80,000. Richard's private security had drawn weapons, and the FBI, tipped off about a major money laundering operation tied to a cold case murder, had descended on them with the force of a hurricane. The morning news was a spectacle. Major bust in the Rust District. Local enforcer arrested for murder, high-profile executive detained. The footage showed Jimmy Higgins pinned to the hood of a police cruiser, his face bloody. It showed Richard Vance, stripped of his arrogant suit, being shoved into an unmarked federal SUV in handcuffs. The news reported that a search of the property yielded evidence tying Jimmy to the death of a former tenant, and Richard was being investigated for illegal ties to organized crime due to the anonymous tip. Sarah was caught on camera shrieking at the cops, her pristine image ruined. Mrs. Higgins was arrested for aiding and abetting. The apartment was condemned as a crime scene. V and I sat on the fire escape of her bar, drinking cheap beers as the sun came up over the city skyline. "They're gone," I whispered. "They're going away for a long time," V corrected, clinking her bottle against mine. Jimmy is going down for murder. Richard will spend his millions fighting federal RICO charges. They ruined themselves. And the money? I asked, glancing toward the floorboards where the safe was hidden. It stays in the dark, V said firmly. For years, if necessary. If it's blood money, we don't touch it until the trail is ice cold. Maybe one day, we open a business. Maybe we donate it. But right now, it doesn't exist. I nodded. I didn't care about the $80,000 anymore. I took a sip of my beer. I was no longer the pathetic, abandoned housewife crying in a luxury condo. I was no longer the terrified victim trembling in a haunted $300 a month slum. I had walked through the fire, armed with nothing but desperation and a loyal friend, and I had burned the monsters to the ground. The wind blew off the harbor, cold and sharp. I smiled a real, feral, dangerous smile. I was finally in control.